Okay. For anyone who is not aware of the location of these PowerPoint documents, just a quick review that it's the CIOC member site. If you click on the Resources tab, under the CIOC version 3 project documents, you'll find all the PowerPoints for all of the sessions that we're doing in that folder. Okay? So, what are we covering today? It's called data management tools. Now, that is a really enormous topic. So we really don't expect to cover absolutely everything to do with data management today. What we will be covering today specifically is our data entry form, our actual entry form for modifying records, not the feedback form. Tools for copying records, that includes creating equivalent records in another language. Our bulk data management tools, which is the ability to add and remove checklist items, set records public, non-public, change the record owner, those tools where you modify information in the record across many records at once. And we'll also talk about any new tools or features that we believe would assist in the data management process. And that we know we're going to have at least one more session on data management tools, which is specifically going to address sort of the public side of data management. So feedback in mail forms, viewing and reviewing feedback, updating and creating records from feedback, and the email update process. So none of those things are on today's agenda. They are their own session. What we're focusing on today is how well your data management forms are working or not working, the kinds of changes that we need to make to these forms to make them more effective, and also to have a little foresight about the kind of work you may be needing to do in the future, the kind of work that some of your partner organizations may need to do in these forms, understanding better how the bulk tools are working for you, the bulk updating tools, and what we can do to improve those, and just a general understanding of how you feel about your current tools, how you feel about recent changes to the tools, and what we can do to make improvements. Understanding we know there are a lot of issues specifically around feedback. We will be addressing issues around feedback, but that's not what we're covering today. Okay? Does anyone have any questions about, oh, I should say, we're also not talking about data structure changes. That's my last point here. So this does not include things like breaking down the telephone fields into their components, or adding new fields, or anything to do with data structure changes. Is also a separate issue, and that will be addressed in a separate session in which we hope to have representatives from, especially Inform Ontario and any of the other folks who do regular work on providing recommendations about what data is maintained and how it's maintained. Okay, so that we will absolutely be addressing, but not today. Right now we're focusing on the tools and how the tools are working for you, specifically around updating information. Okay, any questions on today's content? Okay, hearing none, please feel free at any time to type into the questions. I'm looking for that lovely flashing question signal to tell me if you've given me a question. I'll just proceed. Okay, what do we know about our existing tools? We actually, we as in Chris and I, we don't know a lot about what you need in this case. For those of you who were present, say, at our session on searching, probably gave you a really misleading idea of what some of these sessions would be like, because for some areas of our software, we just have tons and tons of information about what you want and what you need. We get lots of feedback. Lots of information about the kinds of projects you're trying to pursue and what you can do and what you can't do. We hear almost nothing from our members about what they like and what they don't like about their data management tools, and what they would like to see change. And that leaves us in some cases guessing about what you need, because we do use these forms ourselves in our day-to-day work in updating and improving the software. So we get our own ideas about what works and what doesn't, just based on our own frustrations. But we really do not get a lot of feedback from our members about how the data management process works for them, and what tools are working and what aren't. we have a little bit, but really very little compared to other areas of the software. Those things that we're aware of, we really have been making a lot of changes in those areas already. So there have been quite a large number of changes to the entry form, to the copy record process, and so on in the last year to 2 years. And I do want to take an opportunity to make sure that everyone is aware of the changes we've been making recently and has an opportunity to comment on how those have been affecting you and what your feelings are about what that's done to your work process. Because we really, again, do not have a lot of feedback in most cases. We do have lots of feedback about feedback, but not about just the general data management tools. So that's what we'll be looking to get from you today. There are some things that we are aware of before I go into, I'm going to come back to the recent changes. I want to get through the things we are aware of. We know that the entry form can get extremely, extremely long, and that means it can take a long time to load the form and to process your changes that you submit. I want to take a minute to explain a bit about why our form works the way it does today. So we have always had a single update form, and for those of you who work in some other kinds of tools, you may be familiar with what we call a multi-step update process, where you work on the record a little bit at a time, step by step, you know, finish step 1, finish step 2, or click into one section to work on it and then go back to the main form, where you're not working on all your information at the same time. So I'm just going to take a second here. I've got to hand in a question. Oh, Kelly would like some further explanation on what I mean by data management tools, so I'll come right back to that, Kelly. So we've chosen a single update form purposefully and really stuck very close to that model for a long time because it does have certain advantages. And the main one of which is that steps don't get missed. It's really easy in a multi-step process to leave out a step, to not fully submit, to not be sure which of your changes have actually been saved. And by having a single update form, it simplifies the process for our users to know what they have changed, that it's all changed in one step. There's no question about what has been completed and what hasn't. You know, that there's no confusion about, you know, where do I go, which button do I click, which window do I pop up to edit this particular kind of information, because everything they're allowed to edit is all in one place. So that's the main reason that we have taken that and continue to take the one form approach. I'm going to step back for a second. I would really like to answer Kelly's question about what do we mean by data management tools. So what we mean by data management tools are how, in this case, in this particular presentation, what we're covering today, is the forms and other related tools that allow you to change your record information. So update your organization and program records, update your volunteer opportunities. Okay? So we're talking about your regular data entry form. So if I go into an actual record, and click Update Record, this is my main data entry form. This is where I'm going to be doing 90% of the data management that I do in the software, and an equivalent form, obviously, for our volunteer users. It's the same form that you use when you add a brand new record in the software. This is for editing one record at a time. The other part of our record management tools are our bulk tools, which happen from our search results. Here, where I have things like add, remove a distribution code, a heading, a NAICS code, a publication code, etc. Okay? Setting records public, non-public, changing the record owner, updating the geocoding. These are our bulk data management tools in that they allow us to do data management operations on many records at once. Okay? So that's what we're covering today. It's the tools you can do here which allow you to work with many records at the same time and edit the content of those records, as well as our entry form, what we call our entry form. If you go into it, you can see it's called entryform.asp in both the volunteer software and the community information software. It's the same form that you would use to add a brand new record. Okay? That is what we're covering today when we're talking about data management tools. The other aspect of data management on your records is the public's data management of records, meaning that the information that they provide you in order to maintain your records, and that is going to be a separate session. Does that clarify for you, Kelly? I just want to, yes, okay, good. All right. So I'll go back in here for a moment. We'll get through my list, and then I want to give you an opportunity to comment, but also I want to maybe take some time to talk about recent changes that we've made to your data management tools. Okay, we know that the find and replace tool has a lot of limitations on it, and people would like to be able to do find and replace on pretty much everything in the software, and our tools simply do not cover all the areas of the software, and they don't allow the full set of find and replace operations that we could. So there are certain kinds of find and replace operations, including using regular expressions, for those of you who are familiar with it, replacing content from one field and putting it into another field, really more complex operations like that, that we do not give you any capacity to do right now. And if you did need to do something like that, let's say I want to move all the information in my supplementary descriptions and I want to move it into another field, you would have to contact Chris or I to do that, because we don't give you any kind of ability to do that kind of information. So, or anything like that, where you take the content of one field and move it around into other fields, and so on. So, and our find and replace tool is limited in terms of the fields it actually lets you work with. So, and even though we've added to those recently, there's still, we don't have full coverage. You can't find and replace everything, and certainly not necessarily in the way that you would like to do so. I'm going to go into the find and replace tools for a moment. We actually have 7 find and replace tools, and even with those, it doesn't really cover everything that people would like to do in find and replace. There's no ability to preview or do any, we call it WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get, editing on HTML-based fields. Many, if not all of our members, do at least a little bit of HTML in some of the descriptions or other similar fields in their database. And yet, we don't give you any ability to preview the HTML that you're entering to see that what you're entering is valid. And many people do not understand the consequences of adding HTML into their fields, or what it's going to do when they add different kinds of HTML information in their fields. So we know that that's an ongoing issue. And it also becomes an issue when that data gets shared to other systems that may not be able to deal with HTML the way that we do in CIOC. There's no standardized field help available in the software. We rely on our members to put their own field help together. In some cases, we've had members that have generously offered up their field help to others. I believe Halton did that many years ago. But that hasn't kept pace with the changes that we have made to our fields or any of the new fields that we've added. And it really was never official, meaning it was just a borrowing of what another member had done. It was never anything generic. It was never worded to meet any standards, like in the Inform Ontario field standards, not kept up to date in any way. And as a result, everybody's kind of doing their own thing, and some people have either nothing or 6 or 7-year-old field help, which really isn't up to date to what we do today. And there's really no ability to separate out what we call field help, which is some guidance about how to fill out your information that may be customized to your local needs, from standards information like Inform Ontario and AIR standards, where you might want to have easy access to the standards that apply to that field, but still have an ability to easily look at what your local standards are, which may add to or vary to some degree from what the official standards are. And it would be really nice if everyone could have access to all of those things at the same time. Your local standards, what you want to publish to the public, keeping in mind that your field health is also what you share with the public at the moment. So there's no ability to distinguish between here's what the public sees, here's what our staff sees, here is what our standards information is. All we have is one blob of field health and no standardization on it whatsoever. Okay. We also know that the volunteer module is lacking many of the data management tools that the CIC module is able to take advantage of, such as the find and replace tool being a major one. So we would like to bring the volunteers' data management tools up to the same level of what we offer to our community information module users. So, any questions thus far before I go back and talk about some of the recent changes that we've been making to the data management area? Okay, I've got a hand. Let me take a look. Okay. The hand is from Barry. Barry, I can unmute you if you don't want to type a question. You're unmuted, Barry.
Thanks, Kate. I just have a question about the field help.
Yes.
Is there any chance at all that we can turn that off so the public doesn't see it?
We could change the software to do that. Right now you can't. If it's available to staff, it's available to the public.
Okay.
Because we don't distinguish between the two, which I view as not a good thing. I think you should be able to have different help for the public than you do for staff, because they do different things. They have different levels of experience. But we don't have a capacity in the software to distinguish between public help and staff help. So right now you can't. If you've typed anything in for the staff, the public are going to get that too.
Okay.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
All right. I'm going to remute you for the moment. And do we have any other questions thus far? Okay. I'm going to take a few minutes and talk about some of the things that we've done recently. I'm probably not going to catch everything, but I just want to highlight to people, I'm sure some of you are quite aware, but highlight to people what we have done in more recent times to change some of our data management tools. So one of the things that some of you may be using is the thing that just popped up yelling at me, is the ability to do some enforcement about required fields and change the way that some of our checks are done. There's a few aspects to this. One is to try and let you know about problems with what you've typed before you submit the form, so you don't go and submit it and then have to go back and fix it. It's going to tell you before you actually are able to submit the form if it identifies certain kinds of problems. That means if I typed in some text where it expected a number, or if I typed in something in a date field that wasn't a date, it's going to try and catch those things before you do the submission. Optionally, you can choose to have required field enforcement, which I have on my copy of the software that we're looking at right now. What required field enforcement does is it disallows me from submitting a form when I haven't filled out required field information. Required fields are a tricky thing because sometimes there's a legitimate reason for not providing information, and whenever you truly require that information be provided, you run the risk of people giving false information just so that they can submit the form. So that's why it's an optional feature that people can decide to turn on at their own discretion. It's in your agency setup if it's something that you wish to turn on. One of the things to keep in mind if you want to start using required field enforcement is another change that we've recently made to our update forms, and that is the ability to have different forms for different kinds of records. That means I can have a subject form, a subject record form, an organization record form, a branch record form. They can all be different. And that means that when I'm filling out a subject record, it's not going to force me to fill in fields that don't apply to a subject record. And that makes the ability to do required field enforcement a lot more realistic, because you're not being forced to fill out, let's say, a site location for a subject record, which is never going to have a site location. It just doesn't apply. So those two tools can be used together to make the required field enforcement a little bit more effective. I've got a question, so give me one moment here. Okay, Glynis has a question about the add button on community served. I'm absolutely going to go through that, Glynis. That's one of the things on my list today. Okay. All right. And Kelly would like us to see where you choose branch, subject, etc. Okay, so this is done through our field called record type. Okay, here's record type. So this is a field you have the option of adding to your form. The official record types that are distributed with the software are branch, individual, organization, program, and subject. You do have the ability to create other types of records as per your discretion. We have another member who uses two totally different types of vendor and location as their two types. So the actual values you have in here are under your control. The official 5 being OBPIS. If you do not have these on your form, you would go into your view setup to add them into your form. And what happens is when you set up your view, which determines which fields are available on your form, I'm going to go there right now. Oh, and I can't go in here because it'll be broken. I'm going to go in here right now in the test site, because that section will not be working in my copy of the software. So I'll go into the test site. Give it a second. What will happen when you go into your view setup is instead of setting up a single form for your record update, you can create specialized forms just for one type of record. And again, that's according to record type. So if I'm going to go down to the bottom where the Manage Fields area is. This is in my view setup. And if I click on Update Field, it's going to pop up my brand new window here. And you'll see that I can create a new form for records of the type. So I'll say I want to create a brand new form just for subject records. And that's done that now. So this is records of the type subject that I'm going to be creating. So I could then take out things that really do not apply to a subject email. There probably isn't a need to have all of these org levels. Generally, a subject record only has one organization level, so I could choose to take all of these out, for example. They just don't apply to a subject record. There's no former organization name or alt organization name or legal organization name in a subject, so I could take all those out as well, according to what I would actually be filling out if I was creating a record of this type, of the type of subject record. Okay? So that means that instead of being presented with the giant entry form with a whole whack of fields that do not apply when I'm creating a subject record, I'm only going to be presented with the fields that apply to a subject record. Okay? And so that's the basics of how it works. What will happen if I change the record type that I'm working with? So let's say I change this into a subject record and it was previously something else. It's not going to erase those other fields, but when after I have submitted this, the next time I go into this form, my form is going to only show the fields that apply to subject records. Okay, so it's not that, oh, I picked subject, it's going to wipe out all those fields that aren't on the subject form, not at all. In the same way, if you had a special entry form that only had a couple of fields on it, it would just mean that you can only edit those fields. It wouldn't take away the existing fields that you already had in that record. The same thing would happen if you changed your record type and switched from one form to another. It's not going to do anything to any of the existing information you have. Kelly, can you give an example of what a subject record would be? She asked. Yes, absolutely. So one that I've seen in some people's databases is stolen wallet. So it's an entire record based on what you do if your wallet is stolen. That is a subject record. So it's about a topic instead of about an organization or a program. That clarify well enough for you what a subject record is about? I believe there is actually some documentation for those in Ontario about subject records. I don't know if it's coming from 211 or Inform Ontario. I'm afraid I'm forgetting. But I believe I've seen some kind of a document trying to standardize what a subject record is and what kind of information gets kept. So if you're interested in finding out more, probably a post on the bulletin board would gather where that document is and a little more information about what subject records do. But their purpose is to have a topic instead of having a specific organization. Okay? So again, I can't get too in-depth with this right now, but the basics is you have these two new capabilities. One is the required field enforcement, which you can decide on an agency-by-agency basis if you actually want it to enforce. And the other is the ability to create different entry forms for different kinds of records, meaning you don't have to just have one gigantic form that applies to every single thing you do. You can classify records by their record type, and each of those record types can have a form customized to the type of information that you keep for that kind of record. Okay, another question here. Diane is saying it's the subject information is a special segment of the Inform Ontario Style Guide. Thank you, Diane. Okay. So next on this form, let's see what makes most sense. I think everyone's probably familiar with the internal memo change, so I'm not really going to go in depth. But one of the things that we should highlight here is the difference in how we add information. So in the past, if I needed to add something, I would have a specific number I could add at once, let's say 4 slots available or one thing at a time that I could add, and then I'd have to submit the form, it would add those things, and then I could add more. Okay? What we have changed is your additions are now as many as you want. And then I can add another one. Right? And then I can add another one, and so on and so forth. I can really add as many of those as I want. So this is the major change we have made to how our data management works. Instead of having to make a little change, submit the form, make another little change, submit the form, what we're doing is allowing you to add multiple items to a record at the same time without leaving your entry form. And that, this is where our change to the area served field comes in. So once upon a time, when you needed to add a new community, you had 4 little spots in which you could type your community. And if you didn't type that name in correctly, you wouldn't know until you had submitted the form. And then it would invalidate your entire submission. You would have to go back, edit your form, and hope you weren't using Internet Explorer, because then all your changes would have been wiped out. And you could only do 4 at a time. That was it, because that's how many slots you were given. And if you had to do more than that, you had to submit your form, come back, add some more, come back, add some more, and so on. And the same was true with several other kinds of fields. What we've done now is the ability to add as many as you want at once, and knowing that the values that you add are real values from the communities table. So as I start typing, it's going to give me real values that I can submit that match the information that I begin to type in. I can then accept that value and add it to my list using that add button or hitting enter. So I don't actually have to click add. If I don't want to use the mouse, I don't need to. So I can just type Niagara region and enter, and it will add it. So clicking add isn't necessary. The enter key also works. But the idea here is there's no limit. If I want to keep adding and adding and adding, I can just keep going as many as I want. I'm not limited to 4 at a time like I used to be. And I can change my mind about them really easily just by unticking them. It won't submit them. So it's really simplified that addition process and made sure that you don't have to pop up the community finder every time you have to find a particular area, because you can just start typing a few letters that are in that community name, and it will give you suggestions and make it easy to find that value. Similarly, distribution, pardon me, let's go there. This is a big one because in the past, for distributions and also for subjects, you had to know what it was that you wanted to add. There was no way of looking up your list of distribution codes unless you opened another window and went into your distribution management area to find out what your list of distribution codes was. Whereas now I can start typing, and anything with that value in it is going to come up, okay, based on the code name or the actual friendly name of it. And I don't have to worry about remembering what all those values were. Compared to the past where you had to know, and if you got it wrong, again, you would submit, and you wouldn't know until you had submitted that the value that you gave wasn't a valid value. Okay. And we've got someone saying that they appreciate the change to the distribution code. So yeah, it's a pretty big one. And again, don't get confused by the add button. You don't actually have to click on add. You can just hit enter. Right? I can just pick it and hit enter. And if I type in garbage, it's going to say not found. So then I know before I submit my form that the value that I'm trying to enter doesn't exist. So I don't waste time submitting the form, finding out there's a problem, hitting the back button, risking that there's going to be a back button issue, which lots of browsers have some form of back button issue where your information that you filled out in the form might not be kept accurately. So we're really taking a lot of the risk out of the work you're doing in filling out your form by doing these checks before you submit your information. Did you have any further questions, Glynis, or anyone else that I could clarify for you about why we made that change or how it works? It applies to quite a number of fields, so distribution, thesaurus, even organization level. If some of you are not familiar, I'll just quickly show that. Okay. So we made a similar change to our organization level information. I'm going to go all the way org level. There we go. A similar change to our organization level structure. It's going to look up as I type existing records I have in my database that have that value in their org level 1 to make it easier for you to document the hierarchical relationship between different records. So I think everyone's aware that our org level 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 structure means that you tie records together based on having the same parent organization structure. In the past, something as simple as having an extra space could mean that those two records didn't link up. And if you clicked on the organization levels in the record, you wouldn't necessarily get all the results that you wanted because of one minor spelling mistake, a period where there wasn't a period in another record, or an extra space, something as simple as that. So this tool works the same way that we've seen in other places, where it's trying to give you the values you already have in your database to make it easier to find what you need. Now, a little trick with a lot of these, 3 spaces, and it will, pardon me, it will try and do a search for you of stuff that matches. See if I have something else in here that's got multiple organization levels. My favorite's org level 1. And if I start typing, there we go, org level 2, so I can then be sure that each level I'm adding in is going to purposely match previously suggested org levels. So I no longer have to worry about remembering what that proper org level was in order to match up at each of those levels. So that's another similar change that we've put in. Okay. All right, a few more things to do with change to this form. Talking about organization levels, something that some of you may or may not have noticed is that we've added a new feature to check for duplicates. Is that in the general setup? You did where the setting is about duplicate org names. Is that in the general setup form? Okay. So it should be in the, I didn't do it, pardon me, so, and it's that new. In your general setup options, you can now specify if you want to be alerted or blocked from creating duplicate records. So for those of you especially working in gigantic databases with multiple partners, by turning this alert on, if you try and submit a record with exactly the same org level 1, 2, 3, 4, etc. as another record in your database, it's going to tell you when you try and submit the form that there's already a record in the database with that name, so that you don't end up creating duplicate records. That's another new thing that people may not even have noticed because it sort of went in silently along with the internal memo change. Okay, other things to do with this form. Let's see. A lot of them are new fields. These all work the same way as internal memo, where you can add as many as you want. It's just that change to a dynamic form where you don't have to submit and come back, submit and come back. Languages work the same way. So I'd like to, if everyone sort of understands what I've talked about there, I just want to quickly show the changes to the copy record. Oh yes, not in English, I'm aware. Okay, that we have made major changes to how copying records work. And you'll see that this record type comes into play here because if I'm doing different forms, say for a subject record, it's only going to show me the fields that apply to that form. So if I said my new record is a subject record, it's only going to give me fields that apply to a subject record to copy. In the past, you had no choice but to copy everything, the entire record, and now you get to actually pick specific items to copy instead of the entire record. And you also get an opportunity to change the name before the record is created so that you're not just creating a duplicate and then modifying it, you're actually trying to create something that resembles the record that you're trying to make. And most of you will have already noticed the automatically assigned lowest available record number, which should prevent people from colliding with each other when creating new records and running into the same record number at the same time, because it will just automatically take the lowest available at that time. We have a feature that we haven't activated for you yet, but it's there, which allows you, instead of having the lowest unused number, to take the highest number. So if the highest record in your database was 4726, instead of looking for a gap, it would just automatically take 4727. So that can be turned on a case-by-case basis, database-by-database basis at your request, just so you're aware that that feature is there. Question from Diane, or a hand up from Diane. I can unmute you, Diane. You're unmuted. Diane, did you have a question? Okay. If you have a question, let me know. Oh, there we go. It's typed, I think. Here we go. Kelly is saying that she really likes the copy record on the volunteer side. I'm sure it's very advantageous there when you can just redo the duties and the things that vary from one to another in the same organization and not have to replicate all of that. That it's a huge advantage. Okay, well, Diane, if you do have a question, just let me know. I'll keep on moving. Similar to this, when you're we've made a lot of changes to how we create an equivalent record, and you will see even more. You'll see my creative equivalent has Chinese and Spanish and German in it. So, you know, even more is happening that you'll see in the future in terms of being able to create equivalents and that process for creating equivalent records and managing those. So I'm not sure if there's anything else. Chris, can you think of anything else we should cover? Oh, you have headphones on. In terms of what's been happening really new. So Diane is saying when you automatically assign a record number, we're finding it isn't linked to the record owner code. So it's going to be linked to you, Diane, and not whoever creates it. That's where well, there's two parts of it. It will be created on a new record. It's going to assume to be owned by you. And so, therefore, it's going to be, the record number is going to be assigned to be your agency, and on on a copy record, it's going to be assigned to be your agency. On a brand new one, it should be using the record owner that you select in your entry form. So if you pick a different agency from the one from your own, it should be using that to generate the new record ID. If it's not, you should let us know, because the behavior we expect is when we're copying a record, we don't know what your record owner is, and so it's using yours. And otherwise, it should be using whatever record owner you assign to that record. So Diane, you're saying that's not how it is. I can certainly check into it. That's what we expect it to do, is whatever the record owner is that you assign to that record at the time you're creating it should be what it uses to automatically assign that record number. So I'm happy to go in and test that if you think that behavior is not what we expect it to be. Okay. So that's just the sampling, but it really does represent a pretty huge change in the way that we are managing those records. I guess the other thing worth noting that is relatively new is our field history, where you can see past changes to the record, which fields were changed. You can go to that field, bring up a list of all of the changes that were made to that field, compare one to another, and so on. That's the other really significant recent feature that's been added. Oh, I have a really long one. I'll come right back and read that in a second, Glynis. Got a really long question there. So it's just a sense that overall what we're doing on our public, or on our staff-based entry form, we're requiring a lot of JavaScript. You now have to have JavaScript enabled in order to use our entry form. We're doing things with JavaScript that mean that you don't have to sort of keep using the back button in order to do some of the validation that you would normally have to do, and so on. That's been a really significant change that we've made to our entry forms. We haven't made that to the public, and that's on purpose, because we have always had a principle of not requiring JavaScript from the public. So you will continue to see quite a big gap between what we do on our public forms and what we do on our staff forms. Okay, I'm going to take a moment here, and just give me a second, and I'd like to have a couple of posts here to read. One is from Glynis about autocomplete. So Glynis, your question about autocomplete in terms of the searching with the organization name, that was all addressed in the searching session that we did. I understand completely what you're saying. It's about you pick the organization level from the main search form, and you get anything that contains that, and not just that one organization, but anything that contains any of those keywords. That's something we're aware of. It's something we talked about in our searching session, and we did discuss potential things we could do to make that a little bit more the way that you would expect the behavior to be. Keeping in mind that picking from the autocomplete on the main search page is no different from me typing those words in. It's just giving you a suggestion about what you could type. And if I had just typed in the words Catherine Ladniak and done my search, it would find those keywords anywhere. It wouldn't only bring up the record that had Catherine Ladniak as org level 1, right? So you're getting the same search behavior using the autocomplete as you would get if you weren't using autocomplete. All it's doing is suggesting keywords to you. But we have identified that some people would really like to be able to go directly to those records or limit those searches a bit when they're picking a specific organization name from the drop-down list, so it is something we are aware of. Okay, and I have a question from, from Jennifer. Can we expect to enter more than 3 alt names at once too? Yes, so that's the kind of thing we want to keep going on. We've identified, here we are doing things to this form. We're trying to get away from the one at a time stuff like this. Here we are back in the olden days of, you know, you can only enter 3. That's it. And when your boxes of 3 are finished, you have to submit the form, and then you can enter 3 more. And yes, Jennifer, we would love to be able to basically do exactly like we've done elsewhere, where you just enter a name, add, enter a name, add, enter name, add, as many as you like. So yes, we would hope, as long as everyone likes the tools we've been building, to keep building that out to more things, so that we cover the whole form, right? Okay.
I'm actually a little shocked that we haven't done that yet. That would have been it.
Yeah, we covered as many things as we could when we put those features in. Part of it is, as always with CIOC, we work to the funder, and so it's always a matter of the priority of the person who does the funding and what they use, because they're paying for it. So in the case of the autocomplete, it was funded by one particular group, and they used particular fields. And so for the most part, what we've covered is a reflection of what they use. Okay. So I'm going to break away from our entry form for a moment, if you don't mind, and just talk a little bit about recent changes on, and I'm in French, recent changes on our bulk tools. Let me just check some here. Which is basically our find and replace tools, because the others all work the same way that they always have. It's really just the find and replace utility that we've changed. So one thing that's happened is some of the things that used to be in our basic find and replace tool aren't anymore. This is a really clunky basic list of fields that exist in one single table in the database, or one, what we call, it's flat. There's exactly one per record. So you only have one comments field per record. You only have one application field per record. Whereas if you take a language, you have many different languages that you can add to a record, and each of those is a separate entry in a separate table. And so we can't, there isn't just one spot for you to do a find and replace, because we have the languages you pick, plus their note, plus the general notes. It's made up of multiple different components. And because of all those different components, it's really difficult for us to allow you to find and replace, because there isn't one spot for us to look. There's many different spots for us to look. The other really big negative thing here is if you've renamed these fields or used them for a different reason, you have to work with their original name, the name that's in the table. It's very unfriendly to our users that work in French, because all these names are English, and it's really problematic if you've named it for a completely different purpose. You have to know what the original name was in order to use this tool. We do let you search in your checklist notes and so on, but it's very restricted. So that's our situation with our find and replace tool. We've added some new tools as a result of changes we've made. So one of those is the contact tool, which is specifically designed for modifying and adding contact information. So if Mary Smith works for, or is a contact for 7 different records in your database, and Mary Smith quits, and you know, John Blue has now come to work in her place, you want to be able to replace all of her contact information with all of his contact information at once. So this tool allows you to look for, you know, only match records that have Mary Smith as the contact person, and whatever value you have, these new values. So it's a very different tool from the rest of our contact, or the rest of our find and replace tools, and it's designed around how we expect you to use the contact field. So this is a search form, so I only have to enter in whatever I need to match specific people. So I could pick 100 records, and if I said, but the contact has to match Mary Smith, it's only going to limit it to the contacts that match Mary Smith. All right, even if I picked 100 records, it's not going to do a find and replace in all the 100 records, only the ones where the contact name is Mary Smith. I could also say match only records where the email is, you know, mary.smith@myorg.com. Okay, and if they didn't have that email address, it would totally ignore that contact and not make any modifications to it. So this first half is a search form, and the second half is a replace form. So anything that you enter here will replace the existing values. So let's say I just supply a new name and nothing else. Every other field that's in that contact will remain as is with no modifications, and it will only change the name John Smith. If I actually want to wipe out the information that's there, I actually have to put stars in. And what will happen is, anywhere I put a star, it's going to erase any of the existing information. Okay? So I can either replace it with new information by saying, you know, his new title is, or I can put a star and it would wipe out any of the existing values. All right? And otherwise, it leaves whatever information you already had there intact with no changes. So I have to be explicit about what I want to replace. But it understands that with a contact, you're replacing the whole contact record, potentially, not just one little part of it, like changing the last name to Smith. If a new person is there, and they may have a new phone number or a new extension, they may have a new title, whatever the case may be. And you also have the ability to absolutely clear out that field. So if Mary Smith has left and this organization does not have a replacement for her yet, I can just erase all of the contact records that have Mary Smith, and for now it will just blank them all out, and there will not be a contact there at all. I have a question here. So Jennifer is asking for this in addresses. So this is the kind of information I need, is we need to know what tools you need in order to do your job effectively. What tasks do you have to do that you find annoying? Because if you find it annoying, there's probably a better way to do it. And we need to know that. We need to understand what your day-to-day process is like, what things are a headache for you, because if we understand the problems you're having, the things that are not working efficiently for you, we can try and come up with some solutions to have it work better. But we can't guess at what the tools are if we don't know what the issues are. So as soon as we know what your problems are, then we can try and create tools that address those problems. All right, I have a question from Leslie. It looks in a specific contact field. Yes, that's right. So the first thing you do is you pick the contact field that you want it to be searching in. Okay. Kelly Calfley is asking, confirming asterisk will erase all the information in the field. That's right. So there are pretty detailed instructions on this tool. And you can see here it says erase a field by entering an asterisk. And you will see even in the drop-down, I provided you an asterisk option. So if I wanted to wipe out the phone type, I can actually pick asterisk from the drop-down list. So that actually gives you the ability to erase everything, even if it's in a drop-down. But if you're going to erase the whole record, you just want to use the checkbox. You don't want to go through and do one asterisk at a time, because that will take forever. Okay, let me go back into my questions here. And Diane is suggesting that the same ability would be useful in email addresses and web addresses. So that, because those are one at a time with email addresses, you can do that with a regular find and replace tool. So you can actually sort of clear out what's there and put a new value in, or replace an existing value with a new value with a regular find and replace tool, because there's only one per record. So with that, you should be able to do it. It may be that there is some tweaking to be done to the find and replace tool to make it easier to understand how to do that properly, but the tools are already there to be able to do it anytime there's just one-to-one. So there's a single email per record, there's a single website per record. So those exist in our regular find and replace tool and don't have a special tool like this because of the fact that there's just one per record. Okay. So I'm going to unmute you now, everybody. If you do not, so be warned, you're being unmuted. Ooh, the noise starts. Okay. You may mute yourself. Please feel free to mute yourself if you're in a noisy office. If you are in a noisy office, please do mute yourself, and you can either type a question or you may speak, whichever is easiest. What I am looking for from you today is an understanding of what kinds of tasks you're doing that you cannot do effectively now. Any feedback on our existing tools, especially things we've done recently where we don't have a good understanding of what people's feelings are about those changes, and just any general feedback you can give me. So that's where we are. Got a question from Leslie. We want to clear field for publication codes so we can dump those codes from deleted records. Okay. So you'd like to be able to delete all publications at once. That would have been something for the publication section. Yeah, I'll take a note of that. I'll put that in.
Oh, sorry. When you were talking about bulk tools and all that, I thought this would fit into this bulk tools. But anyway.
Yeah. So you're thinking you want to be able to select a whole bunch of records.
Yes. And do clear field on the whole lot of them on the pub code.
So what you would like to do then is in our, right now for our add remove pub code, let me go there, you can only do one at a time. What you're saying, wouldn't it be nice if you could do multiple adds or multiple deletes?
Yes, correct.
Okay. Yeah, sure. So that's a pretty, and that is, I think, a more useful thing, because maybe you know you want to add 5 different pub codes to this at the same time. Wouldn't it be nice if you didn't have to keep going back and forth to add this one, add this one, add this one? And yeah, that's pretty easy. And then you could just multi-select, or we can even do a checkbox for deletion to delete all. That's simple. So if you're talking specifically in terms of the bulk tools, then yeah, that definitely applies. And we would want to do the same thing with distribution as well, and maybe others where you could do more than one at a time instead of just one.
Okay, I definitely had to find a way that I wasn't transgressing the topic.
Oh, no. Fine. I was just teasing.
I know that.
So, yeah, for sure. We can do, so that basically to not have to just do one at a time for these things where you're adding or removing codes, the ability, especially with removal, to remove all, right? That's a key here, is the ability to remove all for all of these things where you can do add remove.
Absolutely, because yeah, and it's partly an issue because when you use those the print tools on the front page, your deleted records can end up wandering into a publication and you don't really realize it.
Absolutely, no, I get yeah. People complain about that frequently, so for sure. Okay, so I've got a note of that. And other people are agreeing that adding multiple at a time is a good thing. So for sure, that's something we can do. That's actually not a difficult one at all. Anyone else have any comments, feedback, things that are driving you crazy? Comments on the things that I had identified in my list? Anything like that?
My only comment about the new way that the you can hardly want the editor's memo, the internal memo works now with, and I really like it because we had already been in the habit of putting our initials and the date and so on in those memos, and this way we don't need to depend on our memory to do that. But I think that, and I'm not sure that I've really got this straight in my own head, but I think the thing that strikes me about it is that the process of add for it is a bit different than the adding that you do in other parts of the form. And what we found in our shop, at least, was that people would click on add, they would write the thing that they were wanting there, and then they somehow felt like they ought to be clicking something else to sort of take it. Right. And they weren't always twigging to the fact that they could actually add a second one, add a third one, add a fourth one, because after you type, the position is usually type, 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 click. as opposed to click, type, 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 do nothing until the end. And so our pattern was different.
Yeah, the interesting thing about that is we actually had, I think, it was either 3 or 4 other fields that work that way, but most people aren't using them. So for most people, that would have been a new concept because most people weren't using the other fields we'd already had in place, like billing address, other location, vacancy. We already had a number of fields that worked this way.
Prior to us changing the distribution code app.
Yeah, so that there had already been fields that did that, but most people hadn't seen them before. So I see where you're coming from. So is it a case that we need to use a different word than add, like new form, or something else to tell you what the purpose of that button is? Because it isn't an addition. Oh, it is adding.
Yeah, I think using something like new might work, just because when you use the same terminology for a process later that's a different process, that's where I think we got into. I don't know, other people may have different thoughts about that. That's just our feedback.
I think that makes a lot of sense. Does anyone else have any comments about that? Because I definitely see the nerves of if I haven't accepted it in some way, is it going to take it? So one thing too that we should maybe be clear about is if the software will yell at you if you haven't added something that expects to be added. So for any of you who have typed in a new community and not hit the add button, when you go to submit, it's going to yell at you and say you didn't add it. So you'll be warned if something isn't actually added, but maybe that's not automatically clear to people that they can count on the software to warn them if they haven't hit that add button in the cases where it's needed.
Just along the lines of a suggestion around that same field, another mistake that we found ourselves making, and I mean, it's not that you can't train yourself out of making mistakes, but I think sometimes when you find multiple people making a mistake, it may be that some change would be helpful to them. And our mistake was that we would go into, instead of going into just deleting where you get the line through and the whole shebang is gone, what people were doing was clicking on update and backspacing or blocking and deleting as an update, and then what ended up happening was there was a whole whack of just stray dates left. Because of course when you just back up and don't actually delete the note, you end up with just the identifiers, and the person had to go back in then and properly delete something that they actually couldn't even see because you don't see the identifier when you go to, are you with me? I may not be making any sense here.
I am. The issue, so it doesn't delete when you do that because delete is a special permission.
Yeah, and I completely understand the why of it. I absolutely do.
So what would you see as the indicator to people that their delete is its own function?
Yeah, I'm not sure what to suggest, because what I found was somebody who didn't have the delete permission went into and they backspaced it out or bulk, blocked and deleted, but what I was looking at then afterward was just the identifier and no actual content.
Yeah.
So it was just a bit odd. I don't know what the answer is.
The issue is if they don't have delete permission, they can't.
Then they shouldn't be.
They can't delete.
Yes.
I mean, we
and
can't
if they do, then they need to delete and not backspace.
Right. I mean, that's the case where I'm not sure what to, if they've been given update privilege, then the reality is they can take all the data out because they have that privilege. But if they haven't been given delete privileges, then they won't see the delete button and they will not be able to actually remove that thing.
We can potentially,
sorry, what?
We can potentially put the delete button in, but disabled, so that when they click on it, they see that delete is
I don't know.
That's
gonna.
And it's
I'm worried about that because I
that
think
that could potentially be frustrating from the standpoint of.
You know what I'll do is I'll use it a little bit more and think about it, and I'll post or send you something about it, because honestly,
what we should do, what I think we should do is if they try and blank it out, it should say you can't have a blank note.
And yeah, that would be helpful.
That would work.
Yeah, then at least it should say, you know, if you wish to remove it, you should use delete. If you do not have the deletion privileges, please contact your super user, right? And it can go on and actually give some feedback to people if they're trying to do that. Because I agree, they shouldn't be blanking it. But at the same time, it can't just say, oh, they blanked it, they must mean to delete it, because we have special security restrictions on deletion, meaning that they may not have privileges.
And really, it was mainly the ones that were imported where people were mucking about in them, and yeah. Anyway, don't worry about it. I just mentioned it.
Okay, so I will take a note, and basically what we'll get from that is that we need to not let people put in blank values, and give them some feedback about if they want to delete it, that there is a proper process, and that they may not have the permissions to do so.
I think the other thing that I would say about required fields, because actually I really like the required fields, but I'd like to be able to override them in some instances.
Yeah, I know. That's so.
And it's so hard to do. I realize that.
It's not impossible. So what we can basically do is, and we've done this in another case, is have an intermediate level. So I'm going to take our organization name duplicate thing that I just told you all about, where you can either, there's 3 levels. There's don't even tell me that there's a duplicate. There's tell me that there's a duplicate, but allow me to create it if I want to. And there's level 3, which is absolutely do not allow me to create a duplicate record. Okay? We could take the same approach with required fields, where we can warn people and say, you're about to submit this with required fields not filled in. Are you sure that you want to do this? And allow them to bypass it, but still give them the benefit of the warning.
That would certainly be ideal for us. The one we had particular problem with was our requirement that every record have an update schedule. Except we have an internal process where when we're deleting a record, we take the update schedule out. So that if it's sitting pending deletion, say 3 months from now, we want the update schedule out of there, and we don't want to be nagged to update it because eventually it's going to disappear.
Yeah.
And that was...
We have 3 fields at the top, the update date, updated by, and update schedule, that are automatically required. You don't actually get to pick.
Yeah, and that's why we had to turn requirement off, because it was nagging us when we were pulling it out for deleted records.
There's really 2 things there then, because the one is to allow you to not have a requirement on those 3 fields, right? That's one issue, and because that might just there solve your problem. And the other issue
except we do want it most of the time, so we don't want people to be forgetting it usually.
Yeah. So there's 2 things. I think that should be a decision, though, that people be able to make a choice. I don't think they should be blank, but let's just say, for argument's sake, that people should be able to make a decision on their own about that, and not have it shoved down their throats that those fields have to be required, and that we should allow people a choice about requirements, whether that isn't just yes or no, that there's a middle ground there where you warn people and try and encourage them into good behavior without making it impossible for them to submit the form. And we can do that because that's exactly the model that we took with this organization named Duplication, because we have one member who absolutely can't have duplicates, period. I mean, absolutely not allowed. But we also know that lots of our members purposefully have more than one version of the same organization record, maybe for a special publication or a private record and a public record, and that's done on purpose. And they know that they have to do it the same name, and they're okay with it. And so we know that it's not a requirement that everyone has, but it's still useful for them to be warned when they're creating a record that already exists. Right? So we can do the same kind of thing with required fields. All right, there's a question here. I'm just going to take a look. Jennifer's saying she likes the warning idea. So it's that middle ground between enforcement and notification. Because right now, if you turn required fields off, it doesn't even tell you. It just goes and submits the form. It doesn't even check. Okay? So, and the other, yeah. So the other thing that we have to potentially consider is, do we need something other than just per agency in terms of required or not required? Where does that really come into play? Is it per kind of record? Is it per users, per agency? Did we pick the right level at which to say that we're going to enforce requirements? We chose the agency level, but Barry is saying, when we're updating a record and forget to update a field, is there any way to have an enforcement when submitting that we didn't update a field? Not really. That's a tricky one, because what if you didn't need any changes? So you're thinking like that they didn't change the update date or something? Because I can't think of any field that you would have to touch every time you touch a record. Do you have a particular, what we would call a use case? Do you have a particular circumstance under which you would want to make sure that you changed the value of a field every single time you updated that record, no matter why? Barry was thinking for email updates. So the email update is recorded automatically, Barry, the update date. Whenever you send out an email update request, it automatically puts a stamp in saying when that email update request went out. So we already have a field for that. But I mean, the issue is detecting that a field has been updated is harder than detecting that it's filled in. And in most cases, you're not going to change a field every single time. So we really can't say you have to change this field in some way every single time you make any change whatsoever to this record. That would be a really difficult case to make, I think. I don't know, if you can give me a case under which it makes sense, then we can sort of come up with a solution that might address it. But okay.
I'm interested in just to go back to the topic of deleted records. Does that come under data management tools? Like what we do with our deleted records?
Yeah, we can talk about that.
There's a couple of things. Our process in deleting records, and we have that nice little questionnaire that we get when we hit delete that asks us when and whether we want to make it non-public if it isn't already and so on. For us, the process would be even more efficient if we could also say, have a choice of removing the update schedule, which I mentioned before, and also a choice of adding in an editor's note to right there in that little window that the page that we're looking at, because we almost always put in an editor's note about why a record's been deleted. So if we could do that all in the one page, because right now what we end up having to do is to delete the record and then to actually do an update which removes the update schedule and adds in the editor's note. And if it could all be done at once, I would expect most people are probably tracking why they delete a record. You know, service is closed or whatever it is that it might be, why you delete it. You don't just delete it and leave everybody wondering why you did it. So I'm assuming most people would document that as we do, as well as not want it coming up in update scheduling when it's a dead duck.
All right, so addressing that, the update schedule one is a bit of an I don't know. I don't know how many people actually do that process of clearing the update schedule.
Yeah, and I would
want to make that a formal part of the process.
We
so
don't.
What's your reasoning behind doing that again?
Because if we, for example, if we delete a record but we're not deleting it for another 4 months, because we're leaving it because of some particular reason. Lots of people don't delete the very day they get told. They leave it for a bit. So it's sitting there with a pending deletion date, but if its update schedule comes up in the middle of that period of time, we're getting nagged to do something about updating it when in fact we actually are never intending to update it again. Therefore, we don't need an update schedule. That's our thinking.
Okay.
Just to keep it out of our road. It's not critical. I would say the editor's memo piece is much more critical.
Right. So as soon as we get into the editor's memo thing, there's two things we should think about. One is that there may not be consistency about where people want to document a note. So we have three levels right now of comments. We have a public one, a staff one, and a staff data manager one, and a staff INR one. Okay.
Right.
And having it in the INR memo may not be sufficient, because if it's pending deletion, the chances are pretty good you actually want to make a public comment. And the chances are pretty good that you want to have an INR bulletin in so that someone who's doing that work may want to be notified, right? And we're
an INR bulletin, yes. More often than not, we actually, unless an unusual, so we usually take it out of public view when we delete it, even if it's pending. But we leave it for INR.
The case, right? Because you may want to allow that service to be searchable until the date of closure.
No, you're completely right about that.
So, and in which case you still want to notify people that that closure is coming.
Yeah.
Right? So my concern about that is, yes, I see the validity of doing that, but I think that it fits in with, assuming everyone likes the idea of how we've changed the internal memo, we actually want to apply that to public comments and INR bulletin as well, and that what you would do is you would tick off, for any of those types of comments, which ones you wanted to fill out, and you would have the opportunity of filling out any or all of them at the time of submission and not just internal memo, because not everybody uses all of those fields. Even though in Ontario they're standardized to have specific purposes, we have to understand that on a bigger scale, and in the case of volunteer, they only have one, or I think they may have public comments, they have two. They don't have three. So we have to understand that it's not always used in the same way, and we should see which ones do you have the permission to modify and give you the option to fill out any of them. So if you have on your entry forms internal memo, INR bulletin, public comments, then you would have the option to provide a value for any of those three or all of them. If you only use internal memo, then that's all you would be given. If you know what I mean?
Yes,
so
yes.
It has to be a little bit more flexible, I think, than just internal memo for it to be truly useful. All right, there's a question. Just give me one moment.
Ward 6 counselor.
Okay. So Jennifer is just suggesting schedule the update date after the deletion. So I can certainly see an ability to set an update date at the time the record is deleted, either because you want to come back to it on the day the deletion date occurs, meaning it's scheduled to be deleted 3 months from now. I may want it to come up and flag to me in my update so that I can take another look at it at the time it's supposed to go away. So I can see not just blanking it out, but actually giving an option to the user, change the update schedule, whether that be change it to a new date or clear it out, either way. Yes?
Yeah, that would make some sense as well, absolutely.
Ward 6.
Any other comments, questions, anything, feedback, what we've done? Take it wherever you want to take it, really.
Well, I like the feature that the duplicate alert. I liked that. We have a very large database, 20-some thousand records, and so having that, just a warning, that would be very helpful. At least it allows you to investigate. And the other thing that I really liked is all of those fields that have the add buttons in. I didn't realize that you could hit enter, that you didn't necessarily have to hit the add button, so I like that a lot too. enter is more of a automatic response, I think.
Right. And that's maybe a training issue. We need to make sure that everyone's aware that they don't have to click that button.
Well, and I think it adds in, it ties into the a little bit earlier discussion on the boards as well about somebody asking if the enter button couldn't submit the whole form, and we end up with Control S to submit the form at any point because the enter button was intended to do other things in the form and not.
And people were accidentally submitting the form when they meant to do something else.
Yes.
Which was causing huge problems, right? So,
yeah.
Especially when adding a record, because it would create your record and you'd go back and then it would create another record.
Yeah,
it worked out very well.
And with the internal memo field, if you go back on it and you've added new internal memo values, it will add them again.
Yeah, I mean, so you ought to, that was, but yeah, there's a training component in here that I think you need to make sure that everyone is up to date on how these new tools really work. And we've identified lots of sort of training items that we need to address, because there's no point in putting in tools that are supposed to make things more efficient if people aren't aware of how they work or how to turn them on or how to use them. So definitely there's a training thing, and we want to make as much as possible everything intuitive so that you don't need to be trained, but there does come a point where you need training. There's no way around it. So we can do the best we can to make it intuitive, but everyone has slightly different intuition.
That Control S is really nice now that we've got it, because if you're just doing something right at the top of the form and you can Control S to submit it, it really does save you lots of scrolling and such things.
And I suspect most people don't know how to do what I do when I'm working in a form, which you see me, I'm sure, if you're in any of my sessions. I'm in an update form, and I need to go edit a specific field like distribution. I do not scroll. You'll see me go like that, okay?
No, I love that. I did that on my training.
Oh my gosh.
Those videos that I just did, I've got that on that one of them because I think that's fabulous.
That is fabulous, Kate. Oh my goodness.
That is a training issue that we need to make sure that people, that's something your browser does for you, and so it's a training issue because we need to make sure people know how to use their browser's built-in features. That is something that Firefox does. All I do is type /. You see it brought up a box. Control F, sure.
Control F works in every browser.
Okay, there you go. So Control F in any browser, and Firefox / will do it, and then you just start typing.
That's F as in find, right? Not S as in search.
That's right. Control F.
F as in find.
So if I'm looking for org level 1, I just start typing org, and there it is, right? So that means that it's easier to get to the part of the form that you want to work with, because usually you don't need to modify everything.
That's one of the advantages of the one big form is you can use the built-in browser features to get to where you're going quickly.
So again, I'm going to demonstrate one more time. I'm in Firefox right now, so that means I can do a / to bring my box up. But as Chris pointed out, if you're not in Firefox, if you're in Internet Explorer, holding down Control F will do the same thing. It actually brings up a more detailed box. You can see this is the full find tool with next, previous, highlight all. It's actually even more detailed than what I was doing with the /. And then you just start typing the name of whatever you're looking for. It can be any content in the page, okay? And this works on any web page. You just start typing whatever it is you need. So let's say I'm going to say test, and I can highlight all. I can go next. I can keep looking for all the things that say test. You see it found specific distribution codes, all kinds of things I can find, right? Anywhere in the page that it has those values.
And this is not some browser-specific thing. Control F works in Notepad. It works, like Control F is the universal I want to find something hotkey.
Right. So that, again, we know that there's potentially an education issue to make sure people know how to work efficiently in these forms. The other thing we talked about doing is having sort of a list of all the sections in the form, because we've introduced the ability to have these sections. Like here I have a primary data management field section. Here I have an organization info section. Here I have a contact info section. The ability to see the sections at the top and click a link and hop down to that section is another potential thing we could do to help people get to what they want to modify. But if people are aware of things like, I can actually do all my data entry on this form without using the mouse once. How many people didn't know that?
Didn't know that. Did not know that.
Right. So using tab keys, enter keys, Control F to submit the form, you can actually have no mouse attached to your computer and completely work. Okay, but we obviously have to educate people because these aren't CIOC features. These are browser features. These are Windows features. It's just a general understanding of how your computer works and not an understanding of CIOC and how CIOC works per se. So that's something that we need to address in training, so people are aware of how to do this effectively. Because clicking around with the mouse is slow, and people are in these forms all the time, and we do need to make it faster if we can. So, any other feedback, any other, as I say, the daily annoyances of things that you have to do that you wish there was an easier way to do?
I'll tell you about it. Oh, somebody was going to speak? Because I've already spoken lots, so I'll shut up if someone else has got something to say.
I was just going to say being able to set up individual forms for the different types of records that we would have. I wasn't aware of that, and that would be very, very helpful to be able to get rid of a lot of fields that you're not using in specific instances. So that was something else that I was very glad to hear about.
Yeah, and really, as far as I'm aware, record type is not something that gets that's sort of officially a 211 field, which means you can add whatever you need. So if you need to create a special type of record because you have a particular need for your data collection policy on that kind of record, just make a new record type for it and make the form be whatever you need. You can have as many record types as you want. I don't encourage getting out of control with it, but you're not stuck with the 5, is the bottom line. And if you need to make them in a particular way, like let's say you had one for faith groups, and you knew that for every faith group you collected, these are the specific fields you expect to be in place for faith groups. That's a really good guide for your data managers because whatever's on the form, that's what they better be filling out.
Perfect.
There are ways to use those types of tools effectively.
Does that also then apply when you send out an update request to the faith group? Do they get the form in the form that you make it?
Yeah, so if I go to feedback fields.
Okay, yes, I got you.
Okay.
Fabulous. Yes, I understand. I see
That
exactly
means that the faith group who got a feedback form would get the faith group feedback form.
Mm-hmm.
Right? They would get what applied to them. So
That,
yes, it's the same thing.
Yeah, adding that into the mix really makes this potentially a very powerful thing for certain sectors.
Yeah, and you'll have to decide individually what makes sense for your organization in terms of how you choose to do your data collection and what kinds of information you're keeping and so on. But the tools are there if you want to use them. So
one of the things I'm thinking is that there may well come a point when that organization branch and all that kind of stuff that's in there already may become a standard for 211, in which case if we've for example classified something as a faith group in order to manipulate for the purpose of a form, it may not comply with what it might have been in the past, which was an organization. Do you see what I'm getting at here?
But to play devil's advocate, if that happens, we can have a map. So we can say export F as O.
Yeah, okay.
So that would mean that when you did your export, it would automatically turn anything at a record type of F into an O when it exported. So we can deal with that. I mean, that's not even worth worrying.
Okay.
Because if that comes up and becomes an issue, that is a really simple thing for us to add in, where you say, anytime I'm exporting this record, don't export it as F faith group, export it as O organization.
Well, I guess part of what I was thinking as well is that it's almost as if there are two different things here. In other words, we've exploited that particular thing in order to function as a directive to the form, but in a way, something is actually both. It's an organization and it's a faith group, and so it's almost like you have two levels of which you want it to be identified as an organization on the one hand, but you also want to take advantage of the form that suits that particular kind of organization. Right. So it's very interesting, though. I think I haven't used it much at all, the form stuff, but it looks like one of those things that you can invest some time in that really in the long haul would save you a lot of work.
Yeah, and then the neat thing about record types to keep in mind too, just to make it even more interesting, is in your user types, which is where your security is set about who can do what, you can say that a person is only allowed to update particular record types. So if you had one person who's in charge of faith groups, you can actually say this person updates faith groups and nothing else, and you can even say this person updates faith groups no matter who owns the record. So it's actually a security thing as well if you choose it to be. Like if I created a record type for child care records, and anything tagged as a CIA child care, I could then in my user type say this particular user is in charge of child care records. That's all they're allowed to edit. So even if there are other records in their view that are owned by their agency, they don't have permission to update them. They can only update the ones that are classified as child care. So that's another take, just so you know how sort of far this goes, that we're really, record type has become somewhat important in CIOC in terms of what you can do and what you access. That is obviously, it's branched out a lot from what the original field was intended to be.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I have another annoyance, if you'd like to hear. I know how you love to hear me whine and complain about annoyances. You probably planned this whole session just so I could whine, right? So, and this may be exclusive to us, and if it is, please somebody say so, and I'll just work my way through. But we have a horrible muddle of a mess in our deleted records. There are hundreds and hundreds of them sitting there, and really I need to tidy it up. But the problem is that we're in a sort of all or nothing world here. You know, delete all, check all, and then you have to go and uncheck, and I'm talking like hundreds of records here. So it's a very significant amount of work for us to do these either by checking them one at a time in order to permanently delete them in bulk, or alternately to check them all and then uncheck a whole whack of them in order to not permanently delete them. And I wondered about the potential that one could have some sort of search or some kind of instruction, because in fact what we want to do is delete everything with a deletion date prior to X.
I vote for that too.
Permanently delete, because what's happened is, of course, and the longer we go, the more of a mess we've got, and the more daunting a task it becomes, and I've just been leaving it there. And we have hundreds of them now.
Okay, so my simple solution to that is check older than. So if we go into deleted records, instead of check all, uncheck all, we can have another that's check older than, and you pick a date.
Perfect.
And it'll go down and pick those. Yes?
That would be awesome.
Okay.
So there are other messy people besides me? Because you kind of try and coordinate it with your statistics, right? You keep your statistics, but then once you've cleaned up your statistics, you want to go and clean up your deleted records that are now no longer relevant because you've gathered the statistics related to them. But then you look at the list and you go, ah, and you just leave it and go on to something else.
Yeah, well that's relatively simple.
Maybe you could explain I've been working a bit with the deleted records, and they are a nuisance. And some of them don't have checkboxes beside them, and I'm not sure why that is. And they also don't offer the permanent delete feature.
Yeah, right here. There's one. See it? There's no checkbox in my screen.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not sure why that is.
See this number 1 under volunteer? That's
okay.
Why.
Okay.
That record has a volunteer opportunity attached to it.
So what has to happen then?
You have to permanently delete that volunteer opportunity before you can permanently delete that record. Because they're attached to each other. So there are a few things we check when we do deletion. One is it attached to a volunteer opportunity? 2 is it attached to an agency? So in your agency setup, you pick a record number, and we don't want you to delete a record that's tied to an agency in that it represents that agency. And the other is a volunteer center membership. So if any of those things happen, then you can't permanently delete that record until you've also deleted that other thing or changed the reference. Pardon me, I have a came from my tongue. I'm talking funny. So most cases when you don't see the button is specifically because of volunteer opportunities. So I can hit permanent delete here and still have it yell at me and fail because, let's say, it's attached to an agency. That's a separate check. The check we do here is only about volunteer opportunities. And, and you can tell by looking in this volunteer column, it will tell you the count of volunteer opportunities associated with that record. So that's how you know.
Okay, so my issue is Oshawa records have been moved, as you know, to find help. So we're cleaning up our database for the Oshawa records still in the Central East. And so now I have this whole stack of their volunteer records that I can't get rid of.
Yeah.
What kind of solution?
Offline, you should talk to me about that because I know why you can't get rid of them.
Okay.
It's because you can't see them. So I have to teach you how to see them first, and then you'll be able to.
Okay.
So follow up with me offline, and I'll tell you what you need to do.
Okay.
I think the other thing that I worry about, and I know when we first got the capacity to delete in bulk, because it used to be that you had to do them all one at a time, which is part of the reason why we've got so many. The permanent delete in bulk was a nerve-wracking and worrisome thing to be able to do in some respects because it was so permanent. But I wonder whether in terms of the safeguard of the deletion, I'm going to back up now and go against what I just said, which is that I don't think that you should be able to delete records that have statistics attached to them. In other words, I think the process needs to be tidy your statistics first, then delete your records, so that if records have statistics attached to them, I think we ought not delete them.
You know what? We can't do that, and I'll explain why. Let's say I create a test record. Purely for, fooling around with my database, I'm just checking some things out. But in the process of doing that, I'm going to generate views on it, even me just as a staff person looking at it. And they're going to be recent. They're going to be, this week. And I have no way of getting rid of the stats for that one record unless I deleted all the way up to the present of stats.
But I guess I was meaning a permanent delete on a bulk basis. In other words, that record you just talked about, I'd be able to delete it by itself, permanent delete, but I couldn't delete it as part of a bulk operation if it had stats attached.
That's going to get confusing for the user, I think.
Okay.
I think it's a good idea to warn people, there's still statistics attached to these records. That's useful. Having a column telling you the last time that record was accessed. Keeping in mind that even though these are deleted, people will still have stumbled across them recently, right? I mean, the fact that it's been deleted for 3 years doesn't mean that someone hasn't accessed it in the last week.
That's true. That's true.
So it's not as simple as that, unfortunately. just wouldn't work out.
Yeah, well, and in the end, the advantage of being able to delete, prior to X is such a huge thing and such a big advantage that I think we just have to be careful about the statistical underpinnings of that. But you do worry about people dumping out statistics that they might actually not be finished with.
Yeah, it's tricky. But I think having a check older then is a really reasonable request. Being able to see when a record was last accessed is probably useful, but unfortunately it's misleading because people can access the record at any time. So it doesn't really say much about whether it's been used in a useful fashion anytime recently. So yeah, it's a hard question to answer. I think we need to keep the bulk tool. I think we know that much. We need to continue to have 2 levels of delete to make it hard to delete things accidentally. And that giving people the ability to delete, to check based on a certain date, anything older than deleted prior to that date, would hopefully make the process a little easier. So I don't know if anyone has any further feedback other than that. No? Okay. Jennifer, I have been listening to you. I saw your questions in terms of the bulk tool and everything. So just so you know, I'm noticing that you're asking questions there. Okay. Anything else that you would like to cover today? Anything you would like to comment on about the process that you use to update records that I could assist you with? Comments about existing changes, anything like that? Okay. Well, assuming none, you may need to think about it, which is totally fine and good. And we are going to have part 2 on this, which is going to focus a lot on the public interaction part of your data management task. So emailing your update requests, collecting the feedback, the form the public fills out, how you process the feedback that the public submits, and all of that stuff. One thing, it would be nice, I'm not sure we really have much representation from volunteer users on the call. A couple, I think, use it in addition to the CIC. I think we do need to know from our volunteer users, especially the ones who have experience in both parts of the software, what things that we can do in the community information side that we can't do in the volunteer side that we really need to try and carry over, especially things like the find and replace tool that don't even exist on the volunteer side. So that's something we're going to want to poll our members about and find more about. But if that's it for today, then we'll just leave it at that. We'll come back to session 2 about feedback and sort of that entire cycle, including email update requests. And if anyone thinks of anything further before that session, you can post it or you can bring it up in that session, whatever works. Email me, email someone from the development committee, etc. Got a question here. Oh, just thanks. When is part 2? Okay, so just to be frightening, we've only posted half the sessions. So we've only posted up to session 12. We actually expect to post at least 10 more. I need to get my act together and start making up a list of the last sessions, which should wrap up end of March. But that isn't scheduled yet, so I don't know. I'm going to try and have it be one of the sooner sessions because I want to carry on the momentum from this one. So probably end of February is when we're looking at for when this session would be.
Kate, I wondered as well, you mentioned that you were recording this, right?
Yes.
Are the videos of these sessions going to be posted somewhere so that folks, because honestly, just based on the discussion today, I've learned stuff. I think other people, although it's not a training session, I think that it does teach you things regardless, and there may be folks who would like to watch it who didn't get a chance to participate.
Yeah. So we have recordings of everything except session 1 and 2 because there was some miscommunication about who was doing the recordings. We have recordings for all of the rest of the sessions, and we are going to post them. We're
That's
sort
great.
of holding out to see if we could get them on YouTube. They're too long for YouTube's policies right now, but they were supposed to maybe allow. That doesn't look like it's happening soon. So we'll go ahead and post them on our own hosting. They're really, really big, which is
I know.
which is why we would prefer YouTube to host them, but they're too long. So yeah, we can get them posted pretty soon. I don't want to wait any longer. So we'll try and get them posted, you know, probably by the end of the week, the ones that have already happened. Again, we don't have session 1 and 2, unfortunately, but we have the rest.
Good. That's great.
All right. Well, I'll hopefully see you all again at the next part 2 of this session, and we can continue on. I know there's a lot of questions and outstanding issues around that area, so I anticipate lots of thought and more annoyances once we get there. All right. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kate.